Please welcome our next speaker, Kyle Malone, a founder at Solugence. Today, he will be presenting How Slick Can the Payables Process Be in GP? Please stick around after Kyle's session for a live Q&A.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Kyle Malone. I'm here to talk to you today about how slick your payables process in Dynamics GP can be. I'm excited to be here. First year presenter at Dynamics Con. I just barely made it in for this session. So thank you for those of you who voted. For those of you that didn't, I'm kidding. No, thanks to everyone who voted. I heard there was 28,000 votes or something in that ballpark. So that's quite a few. So well done. Again, Kyle here, and here's my about slide. But before I go into this, we are recording this ahead of time. I will be present for when this is playing in real time, and there's a live Q&A, pane, I suppose. So anyways, Kyle Malone, I'm based out of New Orleans. I'm a GP fanatic, kind of spent my whole career in using Dynamics GP. I actually started in accounts payable. So this topic is really near and dear to my heart. CPA, I do ISV, I call it matchmaking. I totally made that term up, but basically I help companies find ISV products that fit them, API automation solutions, for example. I do Dynamics GP consulting, and then I'm also a full-time GP administrator for a company down here in Louisiana. So yeah, who cares? Enough about me. So let's dive into this. Today is going to be a ton of information very quickly. I promise you that. I have like 50 slides. I'm pretty sure on average you're supposed to leave like a minute and a half per slide. We're going to blow that ideology out of the water here today. So we are covering all things AP. So first and foremost, some hidden tools and setups. We'll go into document attachments. We'll go into workflows, because workflows are fantastic. They're my favorite feature in Dynamics GP. Go into integration options, just some ways you can automate some data entry. And then my favorite kind of trick here is automating check signatures. You can do this out of the box. Actually, that's a good point. All of the things that we'll cover today will be things that you can do out of the box scot-free. So if you own, a GP license, which I'm assuming most of you do if you're here, all of these things are at your fingertips to enjoy. So again, if anyone's a Weird Al Yankovic fan, this comes from this, but we are drinking from the fire hose today. So with that, let's get right into it. So first and foremost, hidden tools and setups in GP. This one is huge. I think that every person should implement this after this call, and as you're sitting here after this call, after this webinar, or as you're sitting here and you kind of get bored with some of these topics, go and turn it on. So this is Pistol, and the tool is called Doc Date Verify. So first off, you have to install it. That's kind of what this left-hand screenshot is. And then over here on the right, so basically you open up Pistol, Professional Services Tools Library, and then it's a tool. You just click the checkbox, Doc Date Verify, and I'll show you what it does. So you've probably seen this if you've ever overseen the payables process. You see all of a sudden invoices go into year 2050, 2,500,000, whatever it is. It's some crazy number just gets fat fingered in there. It happens. People are keying in so many invoices. It happens. So then you're running your aging. You're like, what in the world? You get it. So you don't want that to happen. So the Doc Date Verify tool prevents that from happening. So it's under two different scenarios. If you key it in a fiscal year that exists in your company, but is not open, it'll prompt you. It says, hey, the fiscal year period is closed. Are you sure you got this right? Because sometimes it makes sense. You might have an invoice from a year ago, or whatever the situation is, it might make sense. So it'll let you surpass that. If you totally mess it up, and let's say, okay, I use the year 2050, that's not a fiscal year in my GP company, it'll just straight up completely block you. So Doc Date Verify, fantastic tool. Check it out. You own it. It's part of the Pistol package. Next one here. I love it. This came out, 2018, making that it might be 2015 or two. If you use purchase orders and you use regular payables, you can get yourself into some trouble if I have a open receipt for something. So if I've received product and then I go out there and I book a regular payables transaction, all of a sudden I've shipped, not received, received, not invoiced stuff appearing on my reports. It creates a mess. So check out the tool under Payables Setup. Warn if vendor has existing purchase orders. So that way, if you're keying a regular payables voucher to a vendor that has an open PO, it'll say, hey, wait a second, this vendor has an existing PO. Are you sure that you're in the right place? At which point you can say, whoops, I need to go over to my purchasing module. So warn if purchase orders exist. So those two, I love it. It's all about clean data. So it gives you that little calm feeling. The cleaner the data, the better off we'll all be. So next thing here. So we're talking about just some hidden setups. So some of this isn't so hidden, but I think you'll find that some of it is. So with a vendor, you have the ability to define default accounts. Yeah, we get it. So if there's any meme enthusiasts here, so this is Vince McMahon, and he says, oh, you know what? Default accounts, that's pretty cool. Ooh, multiple default accounts. Wait a second, default allocation accounts? I love it. Default allocation accounts are the way to go. And we'll kind of walk through all three different scenarios. So the first one, just default accounts. So if you know that every time I use a vendor, it's going to be expense to my meals and entertainment account, whatever it is, put that in there. That way, when you're keying the invoice, you don't have to type in the GL account, obviously. Basic, I hope that everyone's using at least that. The next one here, you can define multiple accounts for a vendor. So when you go into the vendor account setup, you can drill in. Actually, I'll back up a little bit here. So you see this, there's this little ellipsis here. You can drill into that, and then it'll bring you into where you can add vendor additional accounts. So with this, you can define all the potential accounts that a vendor can use. Pretty cool. Or you can even say, anytime I select this vendor, go ahead and by default, give me these 4 or 5 distributions. So that way, when I code the invoice, I get into my distributions window, you see I've already got 2 different lines here because I've defined 2 different default accounts, and I would select the default transaction on both of them. So multiple default accounts, very cool and kind of hidden. That's why it's in the hidden section. So then my favorite is default allocation accounts. So a lot of times people get an invoice like, oh, it's my rent invoice. I got to send 10% to marketing, 10% to accounting, 50% to operations, whatever. So they'll key all those distributions into the payables transaction. Go ahead and create yourself fixed allocation account. You can define the percentages ahead of time. Maybe your rent percentage changes once a year, whatever it is. You can define your rent expense and then set this allocation account as the default account for the vendor. So that way an invoice comes in, I literally don't have to touch it. And then with this setup, it's going to send 20% out to all the different departments in the situation. So default allocation accounts, that's got Vince McMahon saying yes. The next bit here. So this is something I literally just added today because it's such a pain in the butt, to be honest. Automating use tax. Anyone that's dealt with payables and just getting your stinking sales and use tax on it. I wanted to show there is a way to do that to an extent in GP. So first thing you want to do, under the company options, enable reverse charge taxes. And I'll kind of show you what that means, because we are going to set up a typical tax detail, but then you're going to set up a negative tax detail. And that's where this will let you do that. So negative tax detail, positive tax detail. With the negative, you define your accrual account for your sales taxes, put them into a tax schedule. Nothing new there, but this is where it's cool. So then I'm processing my payables voucher. Wait a second. I got a $100,000 invoice from Microsoft. They didn't assess my sales tax. What's new, Microsoft? You can put in the sales tax schedule right here. And then we put in 5% on this tax schedule. So you'll see that I got an accrual to taxes for the 5%. And in this situation, I got an additional expense line that I would have coded to wherever the invoice is naturally going. So that's my preference on automating use tax in GP. Document attachments, love them, fantastic. I'll show you how to just basically set it up. Most, if not all of the setup is under the administration module, company setup. You got to set up your document attachments. The big things here are your default location. So people get this confused, and I think people think that this is where all my documents are going to store. That's not the case. This is your default path for where you will upload documents from. So when you upload documents in GP, it actually stores them in the GP database. There is no you know, there's no way to store documents in SharePoint or store documents in a file folder somewhere else. You upload them into SharePoint, or you upload them into GP, and they store in the GP database. So this is basically a shortcut to where is GP going to go look first when I say attach document. So pretty important. Some people don't want to let their attachments just be deleted. Whatever, you can put a password protection on there. To me, the biggest thing, since we're talking about payables today, is we can let document attachments flow through from a vendor. So we can attach, say, a contract to a vendor, and then that's where I would select allow attachments to the vendors, and then flow. That means that when I submit maybe a payables invoice for Microsoft in here, the contract goes through. So if I'm the manager receiving this $100,000 invoice, I say, okay, well, here's the contract. It's an email. Oh, and here's the invoice. Looks good. Everything I need to approve. So allow attachments at the vendor record and allow those attachments to flow through. And you'll see more what that looks like here in a minute. So exactly what I'm talking about here. This is a situation I'm attaching a W-9 and some random PowerPoint attachment to the vendor record. When I attach them, I say send attachments in email. So for one, if I have approval set up on the vendor, if I have workflow approval set up on the vendor, if I'm the person approving that vendor, I'll get those attachments. But also, if I'm approving invoices for that vendor, I'm going to get these attachments that are attached to the vendor. And then also document attachments, obviously you can attach them at the transaction level. So invoices, obviously, when we're processing vouchers in GP, you hit attach, you put in the scanned invoice, and then we can set up approvals, which we'll look into next. After you attach a document, anytime you're looking in GP, it'll look like this, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe this one. Yeah, I'll go with this one. Bad arrow. It'll look like that. It'll indicate that a document is attached to the document in GP. And then also when you set up workflows, again, we are passing the documents through. So if I'm a person that's approving this payables invoice, I can get a nice, beautiful email out of GP, and it'll have the attachments. It'll have the actual invoice, and then we allow the pass through. So again, this is where I attach the W-9 at vendor level. And then when this invoice approval went out, it's got the attachment from the vendor. So pretty cool. Pros, cons of just kind of a document attachments in general. It's super simple. You literally turn it on. We looked at all this out of Windows. It takes like 10 minutes to turn on. Super easy. You pass through. I just think that's super cool. Contracts, I think, is the most typical example there. Maybe a W-9. I don't know if you want to look at a W-9 when you're approving invoices, but whatever you can. Just ties in beautifully with workflows, which we're getting to next. My favorite part. You can attach anything. It can be an Excel file, a PowerPoint, a PDF, a picture of your grandma, whatever it is. You can put it all in there. And you're taking yourself electronics. So, everyone's heard that spiel before, but this is how you can get started in that direction using GP with document attachments. Some of the cons, there's nothing automated about it. So when I want to attach a document, I have to hit attach, and then I have to go and grab it. And it is what it is. It works. If you spend $100,000 a year, you might get an API automation. That's a stretch. If you spend more money and you get a standalone API automation solution, for example, you might be able to automatically feed things in from email. With GP, you don't have that. So a con. It does better now. If you're on like an older version of GP, maybe 2015, I can't remember the version, the attachments could blow up the database a little bit more. They do a better job now of compressing. So it technically fills up the GP database. If you have like hundreds of thousands of documents, don't do document attachments to GP. But if you're like, hey, I got 1,000 documents a year to put on GP, you're completely fine. You cannot integrate attachments. That just goes back to, hey, I can't email this and automatically make it show up in GP. And then when you attach something in GP, it's only viewable in GP after the fact. So for better or worse, that's how it works. Some best practices, just things to keep in mind. Use designated inboxes. So if I'm receiving invoices from my vendors, set up an email account that's called AP invoices at company.com and say this, I only want invoices to go to this email. It just makes life easier for the clerks to say, okay, everything is coming in here. I'm monitoring this all day. I'm just grabbing them out, put them into GP and starting my process. Desk scanners, that's huge. I mean, again, we want people to actually use the system. So they got to run over to their scanner that's 6 blocks away. It's just never going to happen. So desk scanners are like $100. And it's super simple. Confirmation emails, I'll show this. So anytime a vendor emails an invoice in, let them see the confirmation email. Request specific file types. I'm going to leave that one alone. Make it mandatory. If you turn on document attachments, say, hey, we want our payables invoices in GP, make it mandatory. You're going to save yourself a ton of hassle. Think about the end of the year when auditor comes in. Hey, I need my, show me your last 10 invoices for XYZ vendor. Well, if half of them are in the filing cabinet, 3 months worth are in GP, and then, the last couple of weeks of the year, we decided just to do it manual, not good. So turn it on, make it as mandatory as you can, and you'll get the best return back with using document attachments in GP. Just an example of an autoresponder email. So this is anytime someone emails that inbox, it's going to, please do not respond to this email. Only send in invoices to this email. If you have any specific questions for the accounting team, the accounts payable team, contact the separate email. But autoresponder is pretty simple to do. It's like setting up an away message, but you can do that. So next thing, workflows. I love them. They're fantastic. Workflows. So quickly here, the best way to use workflows is with web services. So this left screenshot here, this is installing the web services module. And then the setup is all just in the administration setup system, workflow setup. So it's kind of been one window, but you can put in your SMTP credentials, make sure the emailing works. And then you actually go into the workflow setup. And this is where I say, okay, look, I want to set up a workflow for payables, batches, for vendors, etc. All right. So first things, we're talking about payables today, obviously. Vendor approvals is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Ever heard that one before? It's fantastic. I think that everyone should use workflows for vendor approvals because it secures your vendor master unlike anything else you can do. Anytime a vendor is submitted to GP, it has to be approved before I can post an invoice. Anytime a vendor is in GP and it's changed, let's say that I personally work in accounts, I work in accounts payable. I say, wait a second, Microsoft, that's a $100,000 invoice. Why don't I make it myself? You can't do that. I got workflows enabled. That change would have to be approved. Fantastic. Workflow approvals. Yeah. New vendors, updates to vendors. Then when we're talking about invoices, you really have two options. You have to kind of figure out. You can turn on workflows for every single invoice that comes to the system. So that's invoice level approvals. And that means really what it sounds like. Every single invoice has to go out and get an approval. Maybe overkill for some. Your other option is to set up batch level approval. There's not a perfect answer here, but in that situation, so anytime a payables batch is created, in order for them to post it, they have to submit it for approval. Someone has to look at it. Someone has to approve. So on invoice level approval, I said anytime an invoice comes through, it has to be approved. You can still set like exceptions. You could say, look, if I have an invoice under $500, just push it through. Don't actually get an approval on it. So what I did in this example here is I said, I want 2 approvals. I say, if it is depending on the vendor class, route it to different people. So if it's an office related vendor, go send it to our office manager. If it's a T&E vendor, go send it to the T&E person, the operations guy, whoever. And then there's an additional step that says if it's over $5,000, I need to go get an additional approval. So anytime an invoice over $5,000 comes through, send it up to the CEO, whatever. You can do things like that. That's why I love workflows. And these rules, I haven't hit like a limit. I'm sure there is a limit, but you can go down, to a pretty good level. So I'll call it 5 steps if you want to. You can probably go that deep. So I set up 2 here. I can't imagine where you'd want 5, but some people might. Fantastic. But just keep in mind, when you turn on invoice level approvals, that in theory, you either have to write an exception. You have to say $500 invoices, don't worry about them. But then everything else has to get an approval. So that's going to be lots of emails. You get it. Then the other option there is batch level approvals. So you can turn it on for, hey, anytime a batch comes through and the user is the clerk in Louisiana. It has to go and be approved by the manager in Louisiana. That's how batch level approvals work. It's cool. I guess you can make it so that everything has to get an approval. And look, this batch might have 100 invoices in it, but I'm only getting approved once, or I'm only having my manager hit approve once. It works for some, it may not work for others. You just have to keep in mind that these batches in GP, there's nothing that controls what you can put in a batch. So if we're saying that, okay, look, every time that Sally in Mandeville, Louisiana puts in an invoice, goes to so and so, well, what if someone gives Sally invoices that she doesn't normally key? It's kind of strange. It exists. I can't make that decision for you. I'm just here to enlighten. So best practices, again, you have to make the decision, invoice level or batch level. Document attachment pass-throughs, a must, I think. And then turn on that vendor approval, regardless if you're not going to do your AP invoices in GP using workflows. Look into using the vendor approvals. It secures your vendors unlike nothing else. I mean, literally nothing else can lock down your vendors the way that approvals on workflows can for vendors. So pros, cons. The workflow is just getting better and better. So I think with like the last 5 versions of GP, there's been new enhancements released for workflows. Fantastic. It shows that Microsoft cares about it. They keep investing in it. The GP team continues to invest in it. Ties down security. I won't beat on that one anymore. You can approve inside or outside of GP. So, I mean, you saw the emails. Someone just gets an email that says, hey, come approve this invoice, or hey, come approve this vendor. All they can do is click the email, click approve, click deny, whatever. Simple. Never have to open up GP. And then therefore it doesn't require a GP license. So very cool. Some of the cons, you might find some scenarios where, hey, look, on my first step, I want to get 2 approvals out of this group. And then I want to go into the next people. As it is today, I don't know today's date. Is it year 2021? As it is today, you cannot do that specifically. I cannot say, look, just go grab 2 approvals and then go into the next step. So, kind of a con, not a big deal. You can find other ways, right? And then also you cannot pick approvers on the fly. I wish it weren't that way, but it works both ways. So today, like I can say any vendor in these classes automatically go to these people. But if I have a vendor that comes through and say my T&E class and hey, this is not for the typical person. I want to go send this to so-and-so out somewhere else. You can't just do that on the fly. GP with like the last version, they gave you the ability to change an approver after the fact, but a clerk cannot have an invoice and say, okay, this one-off vendor, I want to go ahead and send it off to a different person. So you have to kind of set up all your rules ahead of time. So again, security, Fort Knox. If you want your Fort Knox for payables, turn on your vendor approvals, turn on your voucher approvals. You can do also payment approvals. We're going to go into that. Some nifty tricks there. Plus your general segregation of duties, and you have the ultimate security utopia for those people that are super concerned with security in GP. Look into workflows. That'll get you there. Next thing here. So let's talk about getting data into GP. You really, if you're talking integrations, you have Integration Manager, which is available out of the box. GP for the most part. I think it might be an add-on, but it's affordable. There's also other third parties out there. You have the Excel copy and paste. That just came out. Sorry, it's right there in front of me. It just came out in 18.3. It's okay. I'm not going to say it's the greatest thing ever, but there is Excel copy and paste now for payables transactions. Everyone's had it for GL transactions for a number of years now. And then also eConnect. eConnect is like, I explain them as roads. eConnect are roads to integrate data. So if anyone ever comes to you and say, hey, look, we're going to write an integration to GP and we'll figure it out. We know SQL. We can figure out where the data goes. No, never do that. I put it down here. Don't do it. You will get bad data. People will create you a terrible integration. That's what eConnect is. eConnect is rules for your integration. Let people use eConnect. Don't do direct SQL imports. So Integration Manager, Excel copy and paste, and eConnect. Just a couple examples here. Top left here. So you can write integrations to say, look, if it's a credit memo, make it a credit memo. If it's an invoice, you got it. You notice up here, I don't put any distributions on here. So in this situation, I don't have that information maybe with me, or I don't want to put it into Excel, whatever the case is. Just pull the default distributions from GP and then put the transactions into GP, and then I'll mess with the distributions later. The point there is that's very simple. This is a very simple integration. Another example here on the right-hand side is I can define just one side of the distribution. So, I always want the AP account to be whatever the default is in GP. So let's make the debits, the expense sides. I'm going to put that in my Excel sheet. Point here is it's doable. You can do it just like that. Another thing is, these are pretty little Excel files. This thing looks like a computer wrote it. Probably did. But the point is this is a file that came out of Concur, Concur for expense reporting, AP automation, stuff like that. I can write integrations to literally just grab this Concur file or whatever the file is and put it into GP without me ever having to touch it whatsoever. So I don't want people to go in here. I don't want them to dump it into Excel. I don't want it to go through 10 different steps to get to where it needs to be. No, you can write integrations so well that if the data is logically there, I can just push it into GP without having to touch it. So I love this one. I show it to everybody that probably gets tired of it. Don't let your dreams be dreams, especially with integrations. If you can logically put it together, hey, again, I'm just getting this bunch of data in this Excel file. I don't want to spend 2 hours formatting it to get it into GP. Push on your integration team, your integration gurus, whatever it is, or learn it yourself, whatever. You can do your dreams. I'm sorry, it's late here. Point is, you can integrate. I'm done with that one. All right. So does it make sense to integrate bank statement? Am I getting a bank statement? Yes. Let's integrate it through. Credit card statements, push through. There could be a lot of transactions on that credit card statement. Why manually key those? Expense reports. Yes. Who wants to go through and key all the individual expenses on an expense report? Write an integration for it. If the information is already like an Excel file, might as well write an integration for it. If it's information from another system, so I showed you the Concur example. You don't want to get information that defeats purpose, right? Why would I want to double key everything if I'm getting in another system? Now I got to put it in GP, write an integration. This isn't rocket science. I know this. And then maybe not. So, if I have, if I'm just getting invoices dropped off on my desk, why not just have them key the invoice or use the document attachment we talked about earlier versus them having to put it into an Excel file and then integrate it in later. So maybe it doesn't make sense to build integrations in situations like that. And then also, I don't know if I touched on this earlier, with document attachments, the way the process works is I have to create the voucher in GP and then I have to attach the document. So if you're planning to use document attachments and you got all the stuff you want to integrate, it may not be the best marriage here, because what you would have to do in theory is integrate your data. And then once all my transactions are integrated into GP, then I got to go through and I got to pick each individual, scan PDF of the invoice and attach it. So just keep that in mind. So there's no way to integrate the actual document attachments. Next kind of section here, we'll talk about some different ways to do less. I like this one, came out, I don't know, I'm just making these numbers up as I go here, 2016, payment option IDs. So the way they work is when you're building batches in GP, everyone is familiar with, hey, I want to go and select these different parameters. I hit insert, this batch of check, this batch I'm about to run, I only want to pick up my office vendors, whatever the situation is. So you can go through each time you build these batches, and I can put in the filters, obviously. With payment option IDs, you just save it. So, I build this once, I put in these parameters once, I type in crucial here, whatever I want to call it. And this time when I actually build the batch, it'll save it so that the next time I want to build this batch, I literally just select crucial from the payment option list, and then it automatically puts this information in for you. So maybe not, doesn't sound like a big deal, but I know a lot of people are going through, a lot of different payment batches, payment runs, and it can be time consuming. Also, it's always a pain if I create a payment batch and I realize, oh, I forgot to hit insert on Office. All of a sudden, my payment batch is junk. So payment option IDs, I think they're great. Email remittances, this one super slick. It just works so great. Uh, why not? Yeah, especially if you're doing EFT payments, make sure you're emailing your remittances. So I kind of list some information here on where to complete the setups. But simple. Yeah, there's a system setup window here. And basically in there, you want to know like what your email option is going to be set up to. Is it a MAPI? Is it an Outlook? Your IT team can help you with that. After that, you'll set up like the email message. So the email message can literally say anything, which I think is super cool. I mean, I'm creating an Outlook email here. It can say anything. It's super simple. Yeah. Doing consulting, I love when people are like, hey, build this email message for us. I'm like, well, you can do it because it's so easy. And then last bit here is when you actually set up the email for a vendor, you can attach it as a PDF. You can attach it as a docx, password protected if you'd like to. I think there's like an XML option, but you have options, I guess is my point. So if I want everyone to receive a PDF, I can do that. And then once you do it, it's if you're already doing EFT payments in this situation, you're already familiar with this process, but I would select remittance form. I select send document and email. This is also very cool because what it'll do is it'll actually send all the people that are set up for emailing. It'll send out the emails automatically. And if there's anyone that doesn't have email or whatever reason the email doesn't go, it'll then print those ones to your screen. So that way you can save them and mail them out or manually email them, whatever you want to do. So that option, I think that's super nifty. And then, you just see an example here of what actually goes out. It's an email. It's the information we said to put on there. And then there's typically an attachment, and the attachment as well. You can make the attachment look like anything. So your branding, your logo, your favorite color, whatever. You can do that with remittances. The Excel copy and paste for payables. So this just came out. I'm saying 18.2 here. It's 18.2 or 18.3. Just came out. Let's go with fall of 2020. Cool. I don't love it. I do want to show you. So the way it works is if you put your information in specific fields in an Excel sheet, so you want to make sure the first field, first column's got to be description, your purchase amount, trade discounts, right? You put in this sequence. If I copy these fields, I open up my voucher window in GP. After I put in the vendor ID, if I click down here in the purchases field and then I hit paste, all this information goes in automatically. So kind of cool. I'm hoping it gets better. I think the fact that you have to put in the vendor ID is silly. But some people will find this absolutely, groundbreaking, I'm sure. But that's how it works. So keynotes there is make sure you don't copy the headers, make sure you put in the vendor ID, and make sure you click into the purchases field first before you hit paste. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 8 fields that will automatically populate for you if you have them in Excel. Next bit here. So automating check signatures. I think this is super cool. Why it works. So you got to think, it's what it sounds like. We're not going to have people signing checks. I don't believe you need to have people signing checks. I think it's going to hurt their arms over time. They don't want to sign checks. No one wants to sign checks. What you can do instead is set up workflows for security. We talked about the Fort Knox payables. Put on your workflows on your vendors. Put on your workflows on your vouchers at least. You can also get another step that says, okay, I also want to put on workflows on my payments. So what that'll mean is if a batch if I technically today receive like a stack of checks, I would go, I'm going to sign them. Obviously, what can happen in the future if you want to go this route is I personally get an email and it says, look, here's the 20 checks that you would typically be signing today. You can put a report on the email, and all I got to do is hit approve. At the time I hit approve, then the signature is going to print on the checks at the time the checks are printed. So I guess I'm saying that's an optional step here because you've already approved. You've already locked down your vendors. You've already locked down your vouchers. Some people might find you don't necessarily have to also approve the payment batch. And then with segregation of duties, these things are possible. This is why you can put signatures on checks safely, I believe. So to do that, first thing you want to do is you want to go into GP Report Writer, modify your check template, put a signature on there. And then what I have shown here is I am going the route of also putting a approval on the payment batch. So I'm saying, look, just anytime there's a payment batch, I want it to go out and get a majority must approve. So in this situation, I probably have 3 people listed and this assigned to. So when someone submits a check batch, it'll go out there, it'll email all 3 people, and then it'll say, okay, after 2 people have approved, the check batch is ready to go, and then it can print with the signature on it. Pretty darn cool. And just there's an example of what it looks like. What I did miss here is if we want to put the workflow step in between, and me as a person that's typically signing checks, I just click approve in the email, and then the checks print. So anyone seen Ricky Bobby Talladega Nights, those guys are not going to know what to do. These guys, those gals are not going to know what to do with their hands because they have so much free time. So quick recap just on that bit. This is more, future stuff. I know all these slides will be posted for everyone to get access to. Checklist, it's what we just covered. But again, these are the things you can do to get the most value, get the slickest process. That's our buzzword. Get the slickest payables process in GP using these things we're covering today. So I call it king in your payables process. You got famous kings here. Happy king, sad king. It is basketball season. So checklist here. This is really just a checklist on everything we just covered. And then it is worth noting, where does the functionality stop with GP? So GP is an ERP system. ERP systems can do many, many things, obviously. Sometimes they're not the absolute best in some things. GP, I think one of its bread and butters is a payable system, but there are some things. Oh my God, I'm talking too much. Point is, with payables in mind, there is no OCR. So if you were to go out and buy an AP automation system, I can scan in an invoice. There's a OCR technology, optical character recognition, that'll say, look, I recognize this as an invoice. Here's the vendor name. Here's the document date. Here's the document number. Go and put that information into a field in GP. So it kind of does it for you. So with GP, you don't have OCR. There's no automated feed. So that one's kind of a bummer. So yeah, if people want to upload documents into GP, they have to download them from the email. They have to scan them in, and then they have to create the voucher in GP and then attach it. So it's not the end of the world, but there's better ways out there in the universe to handle that process. That's what you get with GP. Not a huge deal. You cannot outsource the payment process. So these are things out of the box. I talked about that early on, but these are things out of the box that you can and cannot do. So my check run, I'm responsible for it, right? I can't just push a button and say, okay, whatever bank out there, go handle my checks for me. Can certainly be set up though. Same thing with payment cards. There's none of that built directly into GP right now. You cannot email check remittances. I hope that I'm wrong. So if anyone knows I'm wrong there, please let me know. But you cannot email check remittances. To my knowledge, you can only email EFT remittances. It's a little confusing anyway, so maybe it makes sense. But some people like to do that. There are ways to do that, of course, just like with everything with GP. Ask anyone that's been using GP long enough, and they'll say, absolutely, there's a way to do that. So if you want these types of things, that kind of just take a great process and make it cream of the crop, that's when you're going to look for like an OCR product or an AP automation solution. So those are your Google search terms if you ever go down that road. And that's it. I have no idea how fast we just went on that. Again, my name is Kyle Malone, based out of New Orleans. I'm very active on social media, very active on Twitter, very active on LinkedIn. I spend more time on LinkedIn than I do Facebook. It's kind of weird. So please, let's connect. Happy to do so. Happy to help out any way that I can. Thank you, DynamicsCon. And I want to be the number 1 vote next year instead of just making it through the cut at the very end. So I know I got a lot of work to do, but thank you. Thank you for voting. And like I said, I'll be here to hang out. Hello, payables processing machines. How's it going? That was weird for myself. I don't know if I've ever sat there and watched a recording of myself. I should have told myself something for the future. That would have been kind of cool, but that was a first for me. So hope you guys enjoyed that. I am hanging out here for the next however long, half hour, 45 minutes, 3 hours, 10 minutes to answer any questions. I saw one come up regarding the pistol tool. A big thing to note, there's a pistol tool for the doc date verify is just for the document date. It to control the GL posting date, you do that with opening and closing fiscal periods. So that, I mean, that should really be part of like your month end process. You close out the month for all of your stuff for the month, and then you check the check boxes to close the periods. So that controls your GL dates when you're doing anything in the system, including payable invoices. But the doc date verify, just think the invoice date itself. So the question, I think, as I understood it was, if I get an invoice from like 2 months ago, all right. So today's March 18th. If I get an invoice from January, you will still be able to put January on that invoice. It's just when you key that invoice, it's going to say, hey, wait a second, this is a closed fiscal period. Are you sure this is right? Well, yeah, I mean, it's completely fine. It's just 2 months old. So that's how the doc date verify works. It's only for the document date. GL posting date is from the GL fiscal period setup. So I did want to kind of clarify there. I think that's kind of a bullet point for the future. So what else we have here? Hello, Molly, Belinda. Tips for managing 1099s. Ooh, do your due diligence, I suppose. So actually, I kind of gone through this a couple times, but coming up in November, December, run yourself a smart list report and make sure that your 1099 setups are correct. When I'm looking at like vendors, I will say, show me any vendors that have had payable activity in this calendar year. And then those will be the vendors that I focus on. So I'll go through and just kind of do a clean scrub, make sure they all have their tax IDs, the legal names are correct. You can do 10 checks for it's like 4 cents a piece or something. Super cheap to do a 10 check. But do that stuff before the end of the calendar year. And then when you get to the end of the calendar year, then obviously then you're just focusing on your 1099 amounts. One, I guess maybe two tips there when I'm talking about 1099 amounts is, there's a way to run reports to say, show me any vendor that right this second is a 1099 vendor, and then show me any of their transactions that were not flagged for 1099 throughout the year. So I think that happens on accident, maybe on purpose, I don't know. But what you can do is, so again, you make sure that every transaction that was processed was properly flagged for 1099 amounts. I think that is key to know that when you're doing 1099 amounts, the 1099 amount pulls from the invoice itself. So if I'm a vendor in GP and all year I've been set to not a 1099 vendor, but then at December 31st, I would all of a sudden get flagged as a 1099 vendor. When I'm marked as a 1099 vendor, I don't automatically get 1099 amounts for all the invoices I've had this year. No, you have to make sure that any vendors that you want to be 1099 vendors, that the invoice amounts are 1099 amounts. So it's a much bigger conversation, but just kind of my two little bits of information there. And then tips for managing. I think GP's done better. You can print, the 1096 forms now, the 1099s, obviously. You had to get the year-end update this year to get the NEC stuff. That's kind of where the functionality stops. So if you're looking for like electronic filing by state, you kind of have to look into like an ISV product. There's quite a few out there. Yeah. So if anyone wants to talk more about 1099s, let me know. Let's see what else we have here. Do you find using a temporary vendor valuable? Belinda, I have no 2 cents on that. So I know that there's actually a shortcut for creating temporary vendors, Control T. I think that's pretty neat. So when you're doing a payables transaction, you do Control T, and it'll open up a temporary vendor setup. I don't have a good answer for that one. So temporary vendors, that's not my wheelhouse. Next question. Belinda, you're just I feel like I'm being quizzed. How would you set up approvals for writing the checks? I've had many customers use the signing checks as the payment approval, even though the invoice was approved prior to posting. How would you set up approvals for writing the checks? Signing the checks as a payment approval, even though the invoice was prior. That's a good question. I personally, I think it's going to be a preferential thing, depending on the organization. So the question is, how would you set up approvals for writing the checks? I'm passing. If your vendors are locked, and I touched on this like 3 times in the video, so I sound like a broken record, but if your vendors are locked down, you have approved the vouchers that are out there. I don't know why you have to approve a check batch unless you're worried about cash flow. All right. So let's say if you're not worried about cash flow, really look into, hey, let's look into like those automatic check signatures. Everything in there has been approved. It's ready to be paid. Let's send it out the door. If you are worried about cash flow, I like the workflows on payment batches. So you can still put the check signatures on there, but just any batch that goes out, someone has to actually still approve it before the check's print with the signatures. As far as how I would set up the approvals, I would definitely do it at the batch level. You can set it up so that, like, if you use a certain checkbook, they need to be approved, or if you're setting up just if it's just like a check batch, I need to go through a workflow process. If it's an EFT batch, I don't need to go through a workflow process. I mean, you can do all those types of things with workflows, which is why I think they're so neat. Next question here: age trial balance versus historical age trial balance. Talk amongst yourself. Okay. The age trial balance, that's just as of right this second. I run that more times than not. Hey, baby. Hey, girl. So this is what you get when you're working from home. Hey, I'll see you in a little bit, okay? I'll see you in a little bit. All right, baby. Bye. That was not staged. That's my cute little 3-year-old. Age trial balance. If I just want to look at today, I'm running my age. If I want to look back at the end of the month, that's the only time I'm ever running my historical age trial balance. So historical, again, point in time. Yeah, the experts definitely arrived. Gee, thanks. All right, what other questions? We got a couple more minutes here. I appreciate the questions. It's good to be challenged on the spot. My daughter's name's Lola. She has red hair. She's 3. All right. Well, if that's it, please reach out anytime. Like I mentioned, very active on LinkedIn, Twitter, all things. Please reach out anytime. A big thank you to DynamicsCon. I've literally been working from home for like a year now. And this is by far like the most learning I have experienced in the last year. I did last year's and I did this year. I just think the event's absolutely fantastic. So thank you to DynamicsCon. Love being a part of it. This is fun. And that's it, everyone. So please reach out anytime. It was a pleasure. Hope you picked up something cool. We'll see ya.